Over the last couple years, I've been playing with this racket, the Diadem Elevate Tour, and I'm a really big fan. I wouldn't play with it if I didn't really enjoy the way that it feels, the way that it swings, the way that it fits my game. I have really a net rusher style of play. I can play an all-court game, but really I'm best around the net. And so that's why I really love these kind of more old school player style of rackets. So when Diadem told me they were coming out with a third version of this frame, along with two other cousin rackets, I was really excited to try it out. And in this video, I'm going to give you my live, real, unfiltered opinion of all three brand new rackets in the Elevate line. So leading up to my relationship with Diadem rackets, I was a big fan of the whole Wilson Pro Staff line. I was a user of the 6-1 string of rackets starting from Hypercarbon and then N-Code and then K-Factor, and I always played with the 6-1 95. I was a huge fan of that racket. And over the years, less and less companies have been making frames like that, which is why the Elevate Tour felt so at home to me. Over the years, I've really enjoyed rackets that are on the heavy side, have more weight in the handle, lighter head, and feel just super solid and clean, especially around the net. So the Elevate Tour version 2 totally fit that bill for me. And now these new ones, I'm really curious because the specs are the same between the Tour. But so I'm curious, do I feel any big difference between the version 2 and the version 3? That's big question number 1 for me. Big question number 2 is there's a light version now of the Elevate and like a regular, there's 3 of them now. There's the regular Elevate, the Elevate Light, and the Elevate Tour. I'm coming from the Elevate Tour. I'm gonna try all 3 right now and let you know how I feel and pick which one I'm gonna play a league match with later on this afternoon. So let's go ahead and get to it. I did some slow wall hitting and just some down the middle shots with the racket that I'm used to, which by the way, recently I've had Big Banger 16 strung at about 52, 53 pounds and this old racket I've been using. Now, for literally the first time I've not swung this racket, here's the version 3. All the same specs, same size, same weight, same balance. This has the Solstice Black 18 gauge in it, which I was really, really happy with previously. I ran out of it. So thanks Diadem for sending me another reel of it. So all of these rackets I'm about to test all have the Solstice Black 18 strung at 53 pounds, and this will be my first time hitting with it. So first thoughts, I had to look at it after maybe 15 or 20 swings because I had to make sure it was the Tour. I don't know, maybe it's just totally in my head, but it feels a little bit easier to swing. So I was like, did I grab the light or did I grab the regular Elevate? But it is a Tour. So it's supposed to be the exact same balance, exact same weight and size as the version 2. It's unfortunate that I haven't been continuing to use the same strings, so it's not quite apples to apples, but this feels a little bit cleaner and a little bit less flexy to me, which that's kind of what I would hope for. But it might also just be the fresh strings and also that this is a fresh string bed. But overall, super happy. Like I said, it feels a little more maneuverable to me. I have no idea why. It really shouldn't. And it feels a little bit cleaner and a little bit crisper to me than the version 2. Okay, so now let's go to the regular Elevate. So this is the Tour that I just hit with. This is the heaviest one. Now let's go to the middle one and see what that feels like. So this is the same string pattern, the same head size. It is 0.3 ounces lighter or 10 grams lighter, and it's slightly more weight in the head. And so the balance point is a little bit closer to the head and a little bit less weight towards the handle. I really like this the version 2 of this racket on the baseline, but just not quite as much at the net. I'm curious to see if it's similar with version 3. I would suspect it is. Yeah, this one's just so easy to swing. It's a lot of fun to hit from the baseline because the racket is just so easy to move around. Those 10 grams, isn't a ton, but there's a little bit more weight in the head. And that slightly lighter overall weight makes it just really easy to swing. I'm not gonna hit backhand drives, by the way, just because I'm still really being cautious and protecting my shoulder, which I tore last year. Okay, so same feelings with this as what I expected. It's a little bit more maneuverable, it's got a little bit more pop and power to it, still very much a player type of frame. If you're more of a baseliner and less of a net player, this is really super solid. It's really fun to swing. I'm tempted by it because I like the idea of being more of a baseline type of player. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I'm more of a net player, so I personally prefer the tour type of racket. But this is just really nice, clean, easy to swing, especially coming from a slightly heavier racket like the tour. Okay, so now I'm really curious. So this is brand new. So now there's a light version of the Elevates. So really close to evenly balanced with the strings in it. And now we've got a weight of just 10.2 ounces or 290 grams. So approaching now what I would personally consider a pretty light racket, and yet it's pretty evenly balanced, and yet it's still 98 square inches, still 16 by 20 string pattern. And so it's got all the hallmarks of a player type of racket, but at a swing weight that's like really easy to, yeah, I can really feel the difference in balance now. Much more weight now towards the head and less on the handle. And so the racket head should just really come around now with this one. You know what, I'm surprised. I'm surprised I like this racket as much as I do. Between it just being a lot lighter than the tour in general, and combined with that, having significantly more of the balance towards the head and away from the handle, I generally just don't like rackets. Like, I generally wouldn't like a racket that tilts in this direction. It feels really good, it feels super solid. Again, really easy to swing, but it doesn't feel flimsy and like a light racket. So this is really nice, and I'm gonna be recommending this to a lot of students. I work mostly with like 3.5, 4.0 level players, and this is like an awesome racket. For somebody who's looking to develop more player-like strokes, longer, smoother, more athletic strokes, this type of racket is so much better than one that's less than 10 ounces, that has tons of weight in the head, that has a super huge racket head. I'm gonna be recommending this a lot to students. And then for my stronger students who are like a stronger 4.0 or 4.5, I'll be recommending the regular Elevate a ton also. And the tour, I don't know. I'm a dinosaur. I'm old. I grew up learning like when old school, mechanics and game style was still being taught. So I'm I'm different, and my skills are more up close to the net. So that's why I personally prefer the tour type of feel. Whether you need rackets, balls, apparel, bags, strings, anything, Diadem makes top quality stuff, and you can get 15% off by using the code ET15 at checkout. Thank you so much to Diadem for their support. Now we're up around the net. We'll get some impressions on half volleys, overheads. I've got the tour back in my hands, and I've got the ball machine set up to just feed some like medium speed balls down the middle. I'm gonna start off by letting one drop. I'll be pretty far back, and I'll hit like a half volley or a low volley, and then transition forwards and get like a medium height volley and a high volley. So I kind of get the full range of feel. I'll hit some forehands and backhands. It's just so solid, I don't think I'm ever gonna stop liking this type of like weight and balance. Okay, yep, as expected. Now this is where the regular Elevate previously, it doesn't quite have that same weight or presence behind it at the net. It just doesn't feel quite as beefy, which I really like around the net. So let's give it a shot. It's tempting though, because it's like it's so much easier to move around, even though it's just 0.3 ounces. I think 10 grams, is it 5 grams or 10 grams? Versus 3, yeah, so 10 gram difference. So it's just that much easier to move the racket around, which is kind of tempting at first for volleys. But where I love it is like on low volleys, touch volleys, to have the weight, the extra weight behind it, just feels a little bit more stable and solid to me. Yeah, so it's really solid. Solid, like middle of the road player type of racket, I would say. It's not super heavy, it's easy to move around, and yet it's got some decent weight to it, just not quite as much as the Elevate Tour. So around the net, I just still prefer the little bit heavier. All right, so now the lights. This is where I would really be skeptical. And I was surprised at the baseline, so I'm curious if I'll be pleasantly surprised here around the net as well. Significantly lighter, significantly more weight towards the head. Let's see how it feels. I'm so used to a particular like hinge, I don't know if that makes any sense, between like taking the racket back and moving it forwards. Even though it's a lot lighter, it almost kind of feels heavier because so much more of the balance is towards the racket head. And this is my preference. Like, it's just over the years, I'm just so accustomed to a particular type of balance. So I feel like this should feel super maneuverable up around here. But because more of the weight is in the head, it actually almost feels, I don't want to say it feels heavier, it's still really solid. Like, it doesn't feel flimsy to me, and that's a huge plus. But it doesn't have the same familiar feeling to me as the more the old school type of style. I don't know that there's another 10.1 ounce racket out there, sorry, 10.2, that would feel this solid around the net. It's just not quite the feel and the balance point that I personally like, but it's really solid, which I'm really impressed with. Let's hit some overheads, then we'll hit some serves. I'm back with the tour. I just really like the weight and the balance of a racket like this on overheads. It just feels like it does so much work for you, but I love overheads. It's maybe my best shot in terms of reliability and efficacy, and this just feels like an old friend. Great, super solid. All right, now the regular Elevate. You can feel the difference in balance right away. And this is really solid too. It's very close to the Tour. It's just a little bit lighter, and the balance is just a tiny bit different. It's just a little bit easier to accelerate, and yet, because it has a little bit less mass, you don't get quite as much of like a violent feeling of the racket meeting the ball when you hit it really flush and square. So you can feel the little bit less weight, and yet it's a little easier to like get the racket head around. So it's kind of interesting trade-off. Okay, now the lights. Really curious about this. Yeah, so this is just, compared to the other two, it's not really fair. Off-center hits, which my first one was, it's just a little bit flimsy because of the lesser weight. But man, I gotta say, they've done such a nice job of balancing it out. Yes, it's lighter, but most rackets around this weight put so much of the weight in the head that it totally takes away any possibility of it feeling like well balanced and solid. And even though it's significantly lighter than the other two, it still feels super solid. They've done a nice job of balancing out the lesser weight with the actual distribution of where the weight is on the racket. I fully expected to really not like this racket, to be totally honest. And I totally could play with this racket. It's not my personal preference, but most rackets that weigh this weight, I would just, no, I'm just not going to use it. I actually could use this racket and feel somewhat at home and happy with it. And that's I'm very surprised by that. I hit my warm-up serves with the old Elevate Tour, just as kind of a little bit of a palate cleanser. And now let's go back to the V3 Tour, and I'll hit a couple serves. I'm gonna take this pretty easy. I'm not that I ever impress anybody anyway with my, my serve intensity. Yeah, it just feels super comfortable, super at home, balance-wise and weight-wise, acceleration-wise. Yeah, real familiar, and I like it a lot. All right, let's go to the regular elevates. I was so close to picking this racket the last time I did the play test, because you can just feel just that slight little bit of improvement and ability to just kind of accelerate the racket head, because it's just slightly lighter. Yeah, it's just like 5% easier to swing around, which is really fun for serves and ground strokes. All right, let's try the light. Yeah, so it's just so easy to bring the racket head around, but it doesn't feel flimsy. It doesn't feel super wobbly, or it doesn't feel its weight. But it doesn't quite have the mass behind it. Yeah, so it makes sense to me. Like, it's very easy to whip the racket head around, but when you flush it and like you time it just right and everything feels perfect, you can feel the lack of mass behind it. So if you have a shorter swing length and a slower swing speed in general, this is a fantastic racket. It's really easy, and yet also it's got the characteristics of a much heavier racket. I really like how they've balanced this out. So I'm going to give you my final thoughts and pick the racket I'm going to use for my upcoming matches. But first, just a big thank you to Diadem. I really appreciate their professionalism, the quality of their products. Everything of theirs I've used has been really top-notch. And you can get a discount off of all their gear by using code ET15 at checkout, or we'll put a link in the comments down below. So between these three, I feel like they've done a fantastic job here. If you're more of an old school type of player, style of player like me, and in particular if you love the net, and if you're a fan of the old school kind of player type of frames, then the Elevate Tour is just like, it's like an old friend. It's like coming home again. It's just a really super quality, solid racket, especially around the net. The regular Elevate though is really close for me. It's just a little bit easier to move the racket around. It just doesn't quite have that same feel on touch type of shots that I really like about the Tour. And the light, I'm gonna be recommending a lot to my students. If you're between a 3.0 and like an upper level 4.0 player, which most tennis players are, you really should try this racket. What I don't like about most light rackets is they're overly maneuverable. It's too easy to whip the racket around and use bad technique. And this racket rewards good quality movement. It rewards a longer, smoother swing. So I'm frankly most impressed with the light, but for my personal preference and my personal play, I'm gonna go back to the Tour again. But I really enjoyed trying all three of these. Let me know what other rackets, strings would you like me to review in the Diadem line. They're supporting this channel, so if you appreciate that, make sure to use discount code ET15. You'll get 15% off of everything that you buy from Diadem. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.